Birmingham in the West Midlands. Now, when you're a bit lazy and you've got people outside the area who don't know the area, you just say Birmingham because that's what everyone knows. But to my neighbours, if I said Birmingham, they'd be highly offended. So I am from Smethwick in the West Midlands. And I help lead a church and also help lead a charity called Smethwick Church Action Network, which is a charity set up by a group of churches in Smethwick. We run a food bank, a pantry allotment, some community spaces, a page-for-fuel cafe, and a few other things. And then, as well as that, I'm, as I said, co-head of church engagement. It has to be co-head. You need to share these responsibilities, definitely, to be honest. So, co-head of church engagement with Diane in Scotland, our Scotland advisor. We have a small advisor team working for Cinnamon Network, Hillary's part of, and that runs training and webinars and forums. And we've just launched an online platform called Connect, which I'll talk about a little bit later. It does sound like I'm incredibly busy, and that sounds like all these different roles and all these different hats I wear. But actually, I have to be honest, it's really a privilege to work in these areas because all these different part-time roles, they do connect with each other, and the learning from each of those roles do feed into each other. So I know something that Cinnamon Network's very keen on is that people obviously are working in other areas, grounded in community engagement, knowing what's going on. And certainly over this season, a lot of our advisors have been working in churches and charities and community groups, dealing obviously with huge challenges. Many of you will have experienced these huge challenges in your own communities and your own churches. We've experienced here a 350% increase in food bank use in our food bank. But I'm really also glad to say we've experienced a 400% increase in generosity during this season. This season that we've had is a season of, very, very difficult challenges, but it's also a season, I believe, of hope. And that's something I want to talk about a little bit as well, that as a church network, these times have been pretty difficult to negotiate, and I know that for many churches, it's been incredibly difficult. In our area, we've seen churches possibly maybe even retreat from the problems because they've not been able to tackle them, or they've had people on furlough. And we've had some churches that have really, really thrived and opened their doors and have really gone for it in terms of their community action and their community engagement. But I think whether you feel you've responded well or whether you feel you've had difficulties or challenges, there are going to be new challenges to meet as well. And this is about the challenge of community engagement. And challenge is quite a difficult word. It's not a word that we take easy, is it, in terms of saying this is a challenge. But I also remain hopeful, and I believe hopefulness is also a key word for this season. I shared this morning actually in our missional listening training, and I think it's at least one person who was there this morning, so apologies, I might do some repeating. But just something I did back in the early 2000s as a community worker in this church I still am in now. And when I first did this job, I went really for what the numbers, the stats, what the challenges were, things that were happening in the community that were difficult. So I'm just going to share just a little bit. I mean, you probably have different places that you might go to for your statistics and find out about your community. We have something called NOMIS here in England. You have, I think, something called NINIS, I think Northern Ireland Neighbourhood Information Service. And it's a place you go to find out what the area is like. And I'm just going to share my screen and just give you a little bit of an overview of some of the stuff that we face here in Smethwick in the West Midlands. And hopefully this will work well, if you know what I mean. Hopefully it's going to work in real time. So just this little snapshot really of Smethwick gives you an idea of the sort of things that we're dealing with here. Lots of challenges, in terms of unemployment, 20% claiming job seeker allowance, people living in high deprivation, lots of children living in poverty, lower life expectancy. And the problem with that is looking at that, it's all very negative. It's all very challenging. And, there's nothing wrong with getting information. There's nothing wrong with finding information and getting that information from those different sources. But as I said this morning, the starting point for my community work in those early days was the need. It was the challenges. And the activists within me wanted to find solutions. But actually, as well as the information, of course, we need to also have revelation. We need to know what God is saying in the midst of all that's going on. And as we said this morning in the training, we did things like prayer walking, reflecting, listening. And I shared a brief story, and I will do it brief, just so for those that were there this morning, they're not going to hear it. The rest of the talk will be unique, but this was something I shared this morning. I remember walking in our neighbourhood. This wasn't a set prayer walk. This was just walking past a piece of derelict land. And there was a small wildflower meadow beginning to grow in this derelict land. And, during my time in Smethwick, I'd seen lots of demolition, lots of rebuilding projects, lots of things going on that, just showed that the area was abandoned and there was wasteland. And but this wildflower meadow was forming in the area where there had previously been quite poor quality social housing. But the land was being repurposed. But while the land was being repurposed, this small yet beautifully formed meadow was beginning to appear. And it was at that moment, as I began to reflect and pause, that a verse came to mind from Ezekiel chapter 36 and verse 34. And the verse said this: "The fields that used to lie empty and desolate in plain view of everyone will again be farmed." And the verse goes on to say that this former wasteland is now like the Garden of Eden. The abandoned and ruined cities now have strong walls and are filled with people. So in that moment of seeing this wildflower meadow, there was a hope. There was a glimpse of something that was coming. It hadn't been repurposed yet, but there was a glimpse of hope. And for me, it was seeing that glimpse in the midst of this abandoned wasteland. And that actually one day it would be repurposed. One day it would have strong walls. One day it would have life. Now that piece of abandoned land is now high quality social housing flats, providing a safe sanctuary for families. And that small meadow reminded me to stay hopeful, even if something feels like it's been abandoned. And many churches will often feel like they're in times living in a wasteland rather than in a beautiful garden. But there always are glimpses of God where we must seek out where God is at work. And I wanted to share that partly because I know as people seeking to engage in their communities, activists that want to find solutions, activists that want to meet the challenges, often we go straight into action. But actually, we need to take time to pause, to listen, to reflect, and find those glimpses of God at work in our places. So this evening, actually, I want to focus a little bit more on a different passage of Scripture, and just to focus on this as we think about community engagement, and then to give you some practical tools that might be able to help you as you engage in your communities. So I'm going to start by just reading from Jeremiah chapter 29 and verses 5 to 7. And these might be familiar verses to you as well. It says, "Build homes and plan to stay. Plant gardens and eat the food they produce. Marry and have children, then find spouses for them so that you will have many grandchildren. Multiply, do not dwindle away, and work for the peace and prosperity of the city where I sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare." So those verses for me are really key in how I think about community engagement. I just want to share a little bit of a reflection before I go into the practical stuff tonight. Build homes and plan to stay. Now, a home is of course made up of bricks and mortar. It's not just materials that make up a home. It's far more, isn't it, that makes up a home. It's not just the physical structure. It's the interactions that take place within that home, whether it be a living room, whether it be the dining room, the kitchen. I've 4 children, so around a table it can be quite manic and it can be quite hard, but it is a beautiful thing to hear those interactions. What makes a home is those interactions, not just the wall and the structures. Now, of course, there's a saying that doesn't apply to Northern Ireland, thankfully, but a saying that here that an Englishman's home is his castle. Now, I have to say, although I would like to sort of dispel that stereotype immediately, there are times when I can be guilty of putting a fortress around my home. I'm not someone who may naturally be social. I like the idea of occasionally being away from people. I spend a lot of my time and my working life, like many of you probably do, being around people. And sometimes it's quite nice, isn't it, to put up that fortress to say, no, this is my home. But I don't believe what we're building here, these homes that we're building in this passage, is about building fortresses or building castles. These are homes of hospitality. These are homes of connection. These are homes that are welcoming, and we need to build those homes in our community engagement. And then it goes on to say, and plan to stay. Now, other versions use the word settle down. And this building and this living and settling down is, I believe, a challenge for us to put down our roots. And being rooted in a neighbourhood, again, isn't just about living in a house and putting up the walls. It's about that engagement and relationship, and it's about the long term. It's interesting, isn't it, in this season that people often get to know their neighbours when there's a crisis. And we've seen lots of things happen here during COVID-19 where streets have got together. We've had one of the reasons we had a 400% increase in our donations to food bank is because of street collections. streets getting together to collect for people who were struggling. And perhaps, I don't know, we've had a bit, it feels like we've had severe weather today, but when the severe weather, people seem to get out if there's floods, and they support each other. One of our advisors in the north of England, Johnny, has had plenty of experience of floods in his area of the Lake District. And, you know, they've rallied together. Communities rally together often when there's a crisis. But what's the best way to create roots? What's the best way to find that, to settle down in our communities? Well, I believe it is to make our churches homes rather than castles. And for me, the season that we're entering into is, you know, I've been here for 20 years here in Smethwick. I feel like I've been here a long time, and 20 years might be a long time to some, and for others, it might be a short time. But I actually think this is a season to become even more rooted in our communities. And I'm asking the question, how do we become more rooted? And again, this passage gives me some great clues. It says, plant gardens and eat the food they produce. So as well as gathering around our table to eat, there's also the opportunity to plant gardens. This is also a place where we're not just consuming, but we are producing. So it's great to be rooted. It's great to build homes. It's great to be around a table, but we're also planting. So what does planting look like for our churches? Well, I don't believe it's just about church planting. This is planting with our time and our skills. Maybe it's also our existing churches offering up their buildings for people to create and produce. Maybe planting is being creative and building something such as a community business or a social enterprise. Maybe it's turning an underused facility into a place where people can learn new skills, where they can find employment. And that's going to be a huge challenge for us post-COVID. I know, you know, this is going to be a big issue for many communities' employment. And it'd be great if I, you know, just encourage churches to think about what can we produce for our communities as well as what can we take. And then the passage goes on to talk about marriage and says, marry and have children, find spouses for them so that you may have grandchildren, multiply, do not dwindle away. Now, for me, this talks about abundance and fruit, and some areas have labels put upon them, and my area is included in that. That often says you're deprived, you don't have abundance. And naturally, people want to move to places where there is flourishing and abundance. But for me, I don't believe that necessarily is the call of God's people. You know, sometimes people like to, and I think this is including many Christians as well, like to find abundance by moving to a different place. What they do is they take their abundance of their gift and their talent and their skills from a place that is lacking to a place that already has abundance. And that often means that those places that we describe as deprived will often become even more deprived because people move out and move away. But the challenge in these verses is that we don't just remain in our locations, don't just remain in our places, don't just build roots or plant businesses or create opportunities, but it tells us to multiply and increase. And this is, of course, a group of people who are living in exile. Even though they didn't see this as, you know, their natural home, they were told to multiply and produce. Now, it's interesting that raising a family is obviously a very obvious way to multiply. But one of the things for me in my area of being in Smethwick, of being rooted with a family, it means the commitment to this area increases. Now, I want to invest in this area because I want to invest in the future generations. Now, I've got 3 daughters currently, and I'm currently going through the foster process for a 4th daughter and a son who's just left to go to university. You know, and as a dad of many daughters, I feel I want to invest in my area to make it safe and protective for them to grow up in an area that is safe for them. But the stories we tend to hear, of course, are stories of, you know, young people living in our communities. Often it's towards the negative, towards a lack of opportunity, towards the feeling that there's nothing for them. But I know in my area of teachers and youth workers and community groups that see young people volunteering and giving back and offering their skills and their talents. And I see schools with such dedicated staff wanting to turn lives around. So when I see multiplication here, when I raise a family here, it means I'm not just passing through, it means I'm rooted here. And it means I'm committed to investing and I'm helping to see the story of my place change. And whether you've been placed in an area, or whether, like me, you felt a calling to an area, which was for me, it was a calling to Smethwick, whether you've lived in an area all of your life, the call for us is to create better neighbourhoods. And it saddens me, to be honest, sometimes when people are looking to move to better neighbourhoods rather than commit to making a better neighbourhood. And of course, the local neighbourhood church isn't going to move to a better neighbourhood. It's going to stay in the neighbourhood and it's going to look to try to create those better neighbourhoods. It doesn't have a choice. And then, of course, this passage finally then talks about prayer and the privilege, of course, that we have to pray for our neighbourhoods. We pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare, in its shalom, you will find shalom. And I personally think that prayer is not just about bringing your community to God, but it's bringing God into your community. And we're called to pray to the Lord on behalf of the city or an area that we live in and bring peace and shalom into that place, to effectively bring God into our places and localities. Now, I would describe myself as a community activist, and probably people like me who describe themselves as activists sometimes use that term a little bit boastfully, and I have to repent of that now and again, to be honest. We have to remember that when we use that term activist, that the first part of our action, the first part of our engagement has to be prayer. And we pray on behalf of our locality. Now, I do find it easier to start something often. I find it easier to get involved in a project. But the first call in our lives is to pray. And of course, verse 7 tells us that when we pray for the shalom of the city, when we pray for the shalom of our place, of our locality, we're told that we will also find our welfare and our shalom. And we get to do this with people. We get to do this with our neighbours. We get to find shalom with their shalom. So in summary, I'd say that we want to build homes, that we want to settle down. We want to root ourselves. We want to plant and produce. We don't just want to be consumers. We want to multiply. We want to invest in our communities. We want to pray. And of course, we want to find our peace and shalom along the way. And just one final thing, and again, I did mention this morning as well, that for me, community engagement is not it's not an optional extra. This is something we all need to be involved in. We talked a little bit this morning about often we use the picture of the church being salt and light, but it's also meant to be like yeast in the dough. It's meant to be like that rising agent, that yeast that rises up the community, that helps the community. But of course, yeast is involved with the dough. It can't be separated from the dough. Yeast and dough go together. So we have to be within our community, involved in our community to help see it rise up. So I just wanted to share that before just going into hopefully some practical ways, just to give you some tools on how you might be able to engage more effectively with your community. But happy for just to take a pause for a moment. If there's anything in the chat, Tim, anything in the comments that you want me to look at, that'd be great.
Nothing in the chat at this point, Gareth, but if there is, if anyone has any questions, then please do ask. Not me, Gareth.
Just to apologise, I've got something that says low system resources might be affecting my audio quality. It's strewn across my screen. Sorry, so hopefully it's coming across okay.
Good.
Okay, shall I just move on? Is that okay to the next part?
Yeah.
So just wanted to give you something a bit more practical, just to show you some tools how we can engage in our communities. So at Cinnamon Network, we've launched something called Cinnamon Connect. We launched it last week. And for me, this is really about taking Cinnamon Network into sort of deeper relationship. We really want to connect to be a learning community, albeit an online community, but a community where we really get alongside each other on this journey of community engagement. Now, I know that sometimes when we engage in our communities, this journey can be quite a lonely one. It can be a journey where we can be quite misunderstood at times. And this is hopefully a place where we can really just encourage each other. So I'm just going to play a short video just to introduce it, just to give my voice a little bit of a rest as well. And then I'll just talk about some of the key areas that are part of this new tool. Okay, so you've got a little bit of a taste of what Cinnamon Connect's about. And I'm just going to also to actually show you on the screen, hopefully as well, if I can get the technology to work, actually the actual website. So this is the Cinnamon Connect website. Hopefully you can now see. So just to give you a bit of an idea of what we're looking at here. So we ask people to think about the journey that they're going on in terms of their community engagement. And we ask them to engage in 5 different areas of that journey. And different people will be on different parts of the journey, but we tend to have an order that we follow. And the order that we start with is calling. So hopefully you can see, I'm just hopefully going to get a thumbs up from somebody who can see the website. Is that coming through? Brilliant. So in terms of categories here, we've got resources. And under resources, we have different categories. We have calling. And with calling, it's about finding that opportunity to listen to your community. We've talked about prayer, about revelation, about getting information about your community, finding out what's going on, taking time to find out how God is already working in your community and how we can join in. So the calling part is the aspect that we ask people, if they haven't already started, to think about first, to go to these different resources. So if I just click on to view more, hopefully this will work. I know sometimes scrolling on Zoom can make it look a little bit staccato. Hopefully all the, you'll see there's stuff on missional listening, stuff on reflection, preparing for change, prayer walking, and various introductions to calling is involved in that. So we ask people to just spend a bit of time looking at calling. And as I said, there's lots of different things there that you can look at, looking for signs of the kingdom already and how you can engage with your community in that way. One of the things, obviously, we then do is we encourage people to look at church. We actually want people, in fact, before community, to look at church. So maybe looking first at the resources that you do have as a church. What are the facilities that you have? What are the people that you have? What are the buildings that you have? What are the connections that you have? The partnerships you have? And maybe else help you identify where maybe some of the gaps are. Maybe looking at collaboration with others and seeing how to collaborate with other churches. So we look at church partly because what we can sometimes do, as I've said earlier, is when we look at community need and we look at the challenges of the community, often we go straight into that and don't look at actually what we existingly do have. And sometimes it can be quite overwhelming to look at the needs of the community and look at the needs of all that's going on without actually figuring out what could we do as a church first. So we ask people to look at church. And again, if I go to the church section there, let me try that now. I think I've got quite a lot of programs running at once, which might be one of the reasons why I had that message come up earlier. So again, we've got a look at some case studies, reflection, things like values, finance, buildings, reviewing your church ministry, dealing with finances, doing some skills audits, some partnership audits. So some helpful tools, hopefully, to help you just navigate that whole area of what your church can do in a community, what your church can be involved in. Then, of course, as it is a community, this is about community transformation and community engagement. Obviously, there's a whole section on community as well that you can explore. Let's just take a look at that. So this is just really helping getting some knowledge and understanding of what's going on in your community. And again, there's things like exploring community priorities, community reflection. And what we do also have, and I won't try and load this up right now because I'm sure it will go wrong if I do it right now with all this open. We have a community mapping tool, and that's a really helpful tool where you can go on and actually map what's going on in your locality. So mapping those partners, plotting what people are doing in different areas. And again, you can actually have that for your individual church. So you can actually plot as a church together what's going on, and you can use different people from your team to actually start filling that map in. And that might be a really helpful tool if you're looking at what's going on in your locality. So again, lots of good stuff around community, and again, stuff that you might want to look at. We then have a fourth section called civic. So with this section, we're looking far more at the wider impact. So not just in terms of neighborhood, but looking how we can impact a region, how we can impact a city, a borough, and look wider than just our immediate locality. So we have various things about civic reflection, a guide to civic engagement, again, case studies, things around prayer breakfasts, and also how we can measure the value of what we do across a whole area. So there's some really important resources there under civic. And then finally, we sort of culminate this all with choice. So what we like to do is say, make this the end goal, not the first goal, because often people go straight into choice straight away. What can I do? What solutions can I find? What projects can I get involved in? We like people to take this journey first, going through those different aspects. And then when it comes to choice, there can be, there's various things around projects, around project management, around fundraising, around sustainability, but also how to select a solution. And as some of you probably know, Cinnamon has 39 Cinnamon recommended projects that we've worked with and helped. Some of them we've helped to actually get started through our incubator program. So those projects are all in our website, and you can look at those projects and help you choose what might be a good response, church response to your local community. But asking you, as always, to try to go through that journey first rather than go straight into the choice. So that's another aspect. And then other aspects, I will try and load the map, because I'm just going to try and be brave and load the map. So you'll see here, probably as I load the map, that it might come to my area. No, I'm being too brave, aren't I? It's just not going to go. There we go. So yeah, so obviously it started with me, but I can add places. So you'll see there an add place button. And there's, I'm not going to attempt to add a place tonight. You'd be glad to know that might take too long, but add a place, and I can change that. I can look at the different type of connection I've got with that place. So you'll see there, good connection, potential connection, want to find out more. And you can plot the sort of warmth that you have with those different places. Is it a place that's got little potential or potential connection? You can actually plot those things on the map. So this is my area, as you'll see here, Smethwick. Oh, got a bit, there you go, I've scrolled out. I'm not covering the whole of that area, I can tell you that. You can obviously scroll in to your particular neighbourhood. And then the final part of the journey, so the actual place where you connect with others. So when we go to connect, you'll get obviously yourself, and you may have a profile picture if you wish to have one. Someone's put that profile picture of me up for me, I think. It's not my choice. I look far too smart. Your advisor, so the person that you can connect with in your locality. But also we want, and this is something we're developing, is a buddy system, to find buddies, to people that you can connect with that might be going through similar journeys to you. There may be buddies that are local, but they also might be buddies that are going through a similar context. So we might put you, so for example, if in a coastal community, we might want to put some buddies together that are working in coastal communities or urban or rural settings, or market towns. And that's what we're going to try and do with that. So you'll have your advisor, your buddy, and then you'll have a list of people that you can connect with. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a taste of the sort of things you can do using Cinnamon Connect. And hopefully that's a really helpful practical tool that can help you start as you navigate the challenges of community engagement. I'll stop the share there. Okay. Is there any questions about that? Any comments? Any?
I'm just making some notes as you're talking. I think there's probably a few things that popped to my mind about it. Sometimes the thought of community engagement can feel very overwhelming for people that are already stretched in different ways, and where do you start? But that looks like that program, the Connect program, looks like something that helps break it down a little bit more. Is that?
Absolutely. I think it goes back to that question also about the church itself and what it can do. Not looking at community first, but looking at church before community, because I think that's quite important. That there may be things that you can do within your church that might just require a small amount of resource. But of course, if you look at a big issue, and I've just obviously mentioned unemployment, that's a huge issue in our area here. It's not something I'm going to go straight into with let me help build a community business, a social enterprise. I'm going to go straight into that. That's too much of a challenge for some right now. But of course, that idea that small groups, a place of welcome, for example, we have a place of welcome here, just run by 3 people. Coffee, chat, connection, friendship. That's so important and so valuable to our community, but it's only actually using a small amount of resource. So I think that's really important, looking at the church, what it can do, rather than going straight into what are the challenges. And it's been really interesting for me in this area, actually, that actually most of the stuff we do and most of the Cinnamon recommended projects that we run are actually all run as joint church projects, because we're in an area where the church, local churches aren't big. They are mostly aging. They mostly have been in decline, certainly before COVID and possibly also during. So actually, the need for collaboration has been absolutely paramount. So I think, you need to look at the locality first. You need to look at the church first and what it can do. If you go straight to locality, I think that can be very overwhelming and can create that sense of hopelessness. So very much looking at, what actually the resources we do have. And of course, also when it looks to community, looking at community resources as well. How can you partner with people? How can you partner with community assets and community projects and other things that are going on? So how can you work alongside those rather than always trying to come up with the solutions ourselves?
I have a question here in the chat as well. Often we look at community engagement in areas of deprivation, but what if your area is not that? How do we begin to do community engagement in areas of socio-economic wealth?
Yeah, I mean, although I don't have personal experience of what it's like in that I've obviously got other connections who are doing that. And I think one of the things they find is that every area does have need. There is a need in every place. Obviously, the needs can be different. I mean, I think one of the things I've experienced in places where there's perhaps maybe more affluence in here is that loneliness is still an issue and connection is still an issue. So actually, what are the issues in terms of when we do our calling and our listening part of the exercises, actually finding out what we see around us can be, well, maybe, the challenges in our area are different, but they're still challenges and they still need to be addressed and they still needs to be that connection. So I would say that, in terms of areas, every area has different needs. I think it's differing needs. And I have to say, I get a little bit, obviously I do live in an area where there is high deprivation, but I also live in an area with great community spirit. I live in an area where there's a great sense of wanting to come together to solve issues, even though most of the headlines, if you type in Smethwick on Google, most of the headlines will be negative. Living here, I know actually there's a lot of positive stuff. So I celebrate that as well. I celebrate the good things, but it's not all about sort of the scales of deprivation. I think it's about addressing what you see in your locality and seeing those challenges and going, actually, what can we do as churches to work with and to address those needs and those challenges? So each area is different, and I think we're only probably 3 miles from an area 2 miles actually from an area of Birmingham that's incredibly affluent. And yet the churches in those areas are quite strong, probably more stronger than this area, but they're still addressing some quite significant needs. I know one of those churches runs a Fresh Start group because they've got huge addiction issues in their area. So they're not areas that are where nothing is, where all their problems are solved. Absolutely not. They're obviously areas where they do need to address challenges, and I think it's about finding those challenges and saying what can we do and how can we address them.